Okay, so this is an interesting part of the multiple choice that you need to know. So these questions, they may come in an exam, so you have to pay attention to how I'm explaining. So the question is saying, which of the following lists contain only arthropods? So in talk of arthropods, we have insects, arachnids, we also have crustaceans, we also have myriapods. Examples of insects, we have the housefly, mosquito, butterfly, cockroach, we have the grasshopper. Then when it comes to the arachnoids, let me say arachnids. Arachnids, like for example, you can talk of these, the arachnids, the spider, scorpions, tick or ticks. Then we also have the crustaceans. So in talk of crustaceans, we have the crabs, the lobsters or the lobster. Then we also have the myriapods. The myriapods, for example, you can talk of the millipede, the centipede. All those are the examples of the arthropods. So meaning to say the answer here is just going to be B. Then for the second question, it is saying the table shows the mass of some nutrients found in 100 grams of 4 different foods. So we have this table here showing different foods. So the question is saying, which foods would best prevent leakages as well as scurvy? So leakages, in terms of the signs and symptoms or signs, the person is going to have soft bones due to lack of vitamin D. So the person is going to lack vitamin D. Apart from that one, the person is going to lack calcium. So calcium is very, very important because it is a component of the bones. So if the person is lacking vitamin D as well as calcium, the person is going to have soft bones. As the result, some of the bones may even fracture. Then when you talk of scurvy is where now someone is bleeding in gums, and this one is caused by lack of vitamin C. So when someone is lacking vitamin C, is going to suffer from scurvy. So these are the things that you need to know. So now, since the question is saying which foods would best prevent leakage as well as scurvy, so we just need to look at the foods as well as the contents here. So we have to, for the leakage, we need to look at vitamin D as well as calcium. Then for scurvy, we need to look at vitamin C only. So if you look at here, we have beans, bread, cheese as well as eggs. So if you see here, we have vitamin C as well as vitamin D. We don't have calcium. So we're just going to focus on two things. So here we have vitamin C, which is beans. So this one here is going to prevent scurvy. So this one is for scurvy. Okay, it's for scurvy. This is R, then this is Y, V, Y. Then since here we have vitamin D, since here we have 0, but here also have a small amount of vitamin D. Now this one is smaller than this one, so we have to pick the one which is in ice content. So we have this one here, and this one is giving us the eggs. So eggs are the ones that are preventing now the leakage. So for the leakage, we need to have eggs. Where are the eggs? So we have eggs here. And then for the scurvy, we need to have beans. So we have beans here. So the answer is just going to be D. Then for the third question, it is saying the diagram shows some food moving along the alimentary canal. So this is alimentary canal, specifically the esophagus. So the esophagus has two muscles. We have the inner circular muscles as well as the longitudinal muscles. So we have these which are called the circular muscles contracting. So the contraction of the circular muscles and the longitudinal muscles, which are these, proceeding with the relaxation of the same circular muscles as well as the longitudinal muscles in front. It is called peristosis or periostosis, according to how you pronounce it. So peristosis is the alternate contraction of the circular muscles as well as the longitudinal muscles via the alimentary canal or the GIT. So meaning to say the answer here is just going to be peristalsis. Okay, so let's see other questions. So we have this question which is saying the diagram shows 4 cells. So we have the root hair cell. So this one is called the root air cell. So in terms of the function of the root air cell, this one absorb water and the mineral source from the ground. Then the second one, this one is the xylem, the one which transport water. Then the other one is phloem, which transport manufactured foods. Like for example, you can talk of amino acids and sucrose. Then this is the muscle cell, or you can say skeletal muscle cell. Skeletal muscle cell. Then the last one is the RBC, which is the red blood cell. So the muscle cell is the one which is involved in the contraction and relaxation for you to locomote or for you to move the body parts. The red blood cells is the one that transport oxygen and small amount of carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs. So the question is saying which cells transport water. So we have 1 and 2. So 1 and 2, the answer here is just going to be A. So that is the way we answer. So in the pancreas, there are groups of cells that make insulin. Specifically, we have the beta cells that make insulin. Then the alpha cells are the ones that make glucagon. So what describes these cells? So since it is saying the group of cells, so the group of cells is called what? A tissue. So meaning to say, the answer is just going to say the tissue in an organ. Pancreas is an organ. So the group of cells that makes now insulin, which are called the beta cells. Okay, so this is the beta cells. So these beta cells are the tissues in an organ, which is the pancreas. Then the second one is saying, the diagram shows the female reproductive system. Where does fertilization takes place or take place? So we have the ovary, the fallopian tube, the uterus, as well as the vagina. So the process of fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube, which is the ampulla or posterior ampulla. Then also have this question, which is saying the diagram shows a section through the brain. So we have this part here, which is called the cerebellum. Let me say cerebrum, not cerebellum. This one is the cerebrum, the one that is responsible for thinking, memory, perception, as well as thoughts. So you are able to remember, you are able to think, you are able to memorize because of the cerebrum. Then this is the cerebellum, the small part. So this one is the cerebellum. So this cerebellum is the one which involves in coordination and movement in terms of how you contract your muscles and the balance, your posture is because of the cerebellum. So when someone is drunk, the part which is going to be affected is this one. That's the reason why you see the drunk person moving like the road is too small for him or her, because this part is being disturbed. As a result, your posture is going to be disturbed as well as the way you are going to coordinate yourself. Then this part here, this one is just the junction between the pons. So this part here is called the pons, and this one here is called the medulla or the medulla oblongata. So that junction is very, very important in that it helps in controlling the respiratory system as well as the heart rate and other things. Then this part here is called the hypothalamus. For this one here, you find that for hypothalamus, it is involved in or it connects the endocrine system as well as the nervous system. So it's very, very important. It has many nuclei, I can say. We have hypothalamic nuclei and different types of nuclei. So this one here is also known as the thirst center because it controls thirst. So let's answer the question. So which groups control balance, breathing and memory? So the one which control memory is Z. So for memory, we are going to go for this one and this one for Z. Okay. Then the one that controls breathing rate is which part? Part X. So you have to go with this one. Then the one that controls balance is part W. So therefore the answer is just going to be A. Then we also have this one, which is saying the diagram shows some structures in human skin. So you have this part here, which is the follicle or air follicle. So I can just say air follicle. Then this part here is called the blood vessel. So this is the blood vessel. Then this part here is called the sweat gland. Sweat gland. So the function of the sweat gland is to produce sweat. The function of the follicle, the hair follicle, it is to contract as well as relax. When it is cold, it is going to relax. Then when it is hot, it is going to contract. Okay, so that is one thing that you need to know. And then here, when it is hot, the blood vessels are going to dilate, meaning to say they are going to appear on the skin. So that's the reason why you are able to see the blood vessels when it is hot. Then when it is cold, they are going to they are going to constrict. That is vasoconstriction. Then when it is hot, that is vasodilation. So in terms of the structure, X is the sweat gland. Then for Y is the follicle, or hair follicle. Then Z is the blood vessel. So the answer is just going to be C. So these are the questions which I had for you. Thank you very much for watching.